It had frozen hard in the night, and the ground had not softened all day. By evening, the drive at Cadre House was rutted iron under a thin skin of new snow. The carriages came up it slowly, one behind another, and the horses set their feet down with care because horses know ice better than men do. In the second carriage from the end, Damaris Thrale sat with her hands folded and listened to her stepmother explain, for the third time since Marbrook, how a young woman should hold her chin. "Level," Drusilla said, "level and pleasant. And you will not speak of your father, nor of the bridge." "No, ma'am." Octavia looked out of the window and said nothing, which was her way of agreeing with her mother without the trouble of speaking. The carriage stopped. Music came thin and warm out of the open doors above, and the light lay yellow on the snow and moved when people passed the windows. Drusilla gathered her skirts. "You will stay with the carriage." Damaris turned her head. "Do not make a face. I will not stand in that room and be asked why the girl who would not sign is at my elbow. Your sister has a chance tonight. You will not spoil it by being looked at." At the top of the steps, the man in the doorway looked past them at the young woman still sitting in the dark of the carriage and began to ask a question, and Drusilla answered it without turning her head. "She is not of the party." The door took them in. It closed. The yard behind the house was a long cobbled place with stables down two sides. It smelled of horse and coal smoke and wet straw. Iron rang on stone. The music came over the roof in pieces, losing half of itself on the way. The cold came up through her thin shoes and settled in and stayed. She did not go to the brazier where the coachman stood. She went along the line of waiting horses and put her hand flat on a shoulder here and a neck there as she passed. It was not a decision. Her father had done it. She had learned it before she learned to read. Then the torch fell. She heard it before she understood it. A hiss, a soft, heavy sound, a boy's voice going very high, then a scream that was not a boy. Damaris was already running. Her shoe went out from under her on the second stride, and she caught a mounting block and did not stop. A man stepped into her way, and she went round him and did not stop. Someone shouted at her to keep back, and she did not stop. At the far end, a link boy had gone down on the ice with his pitch torch still burning, and it had rolled onto the nose of a team of 4 blacks standing in harness by the wall. The lead horse went up. The horse beside it went up with it. The other 2 felt the poles move and did what horses do. The team came off the wall in a rush and swung across the yard with the carriage slewing behind, and the wheels found the ice and let go, and the whole of it slid sideways toward the stable arch. She saw the old man then. He was at the leaders' heads, where he should have been, where a good man always is. His hat was gone, his feet were going, and he could not get them under him. His arm above the elbow had turned inside the loop of the rein the way arms do when a man will not let go, and the horse was carrying him, and the near 4 came down beside his hip each stride. The arch was coming. Damaris did not think about it. She went at the near leader from the front and to the side, which is the only place to go, and she got one hand into the cheek strap and the other high on the noseband and put her whole weight on it and turned the horse's head hard into its own shoulder. A horse cannot run where its head will not point. That is the first thing. That is the thing before all the others. The horse came round. It fought her. Its shoulder struck her and knocked the air out of her, and she kept her grip and kept turning, and did not let the head come back. Her feet slid. She let them slide. She had no strength that could hold 4 horses. She was not trying to hold 4 horses. She was trying to make one horse turn a circle, and a horse in a circle is a horse that is slowing down. "Steady," she said, low and flat with nothing in it. Horses do not hear words. They hear what is under the words. "Steady now, steady." The team came round in a long, ragged half-circle, and the carriage swung and struck the wall with the rear wheel, and stopped. And the stopping went up the poles, and the horses stood. They stood shaking. She stood shaking with them. She did not let go of the noseband. "His arm is in the rein," she said. Somebody take his arm out of the rain. Nobody moved for 1 whole second. Then everybody moved at once. 2 coachmen got the old man free and dragged him back across the cobbles by the shoulders of his coat. A 3rd got to the offside leader. Damaris stayed where she was, with her fingers hooked into the leather and her cheek against a hot, wet neck, breathing the smell of frightened horse until the shaking under her hand had gone down to nothing. Then she let go. He was on his back on the stones, with his coat open, pulling air in long, ugly pulls. He was older than she had understood from across the yard, white hair cut close. His right arm lay at a wrong angle across his chest, and there was blood at his temple where the ice had taken him. His left hand came up off the stones and closed on her sleeve. He had a great deal of strength in that hand for a man in the state he was in. "Do not," he said. She bent lower. "Lie still. Do not send to the house." Damaris put her hand over his and held it against her sleeve. "You have broken your arm," she said. "You were going to let me look at it." "Girl, I am looking at it." She got her fingers under the coat sleeve and worked down and felt where it had gone above the elbow, and cleanly. She had felt worse on a yearling. She had felt worse on her father. 2 whips, she said, and somebody's neckcloth, not a wet one. She splinted the arm against his body with the whipstocks laid along it, and the old man made no sound while she did it, which told her more about him than anything he had said. "You are cold," he said when she had finished. "You are 70 years old and lying on ice, and you are telling me I am cold." 68. That is worse. Something at the corner of his mouth was not quite a smile. He looked past her at the black horses standing quiet with a man at their heads, and then back at her. "You went to the leader," he said, "from the front and to the side. There is nowhere else to go." "There are a great many men in this yard who would have gone to the wheel horse, and more who would have gone nowhere at all." She did not answer that. She and 2 of the coachmen brought him up off the cobbles to the brazier and set him on a bench against the warm brick, and someone put a horse blanket round him. It was only in the firelight that she looked properly at the carriage he had come off. A plain black coach, no crest on the panel. But the paint on the door was newer than the paint everywhere else, and newer in a shape, and the shape was oval. And the 4 blacks were matched to a hand's breadth, and worth more than the house she slept in and the land under it together. She put it away. It was not her business what a man drove. His arm was broken, and his lips had gone the color of the sky before rain. "Drink," she said, and held a tin cup for him. Because he had only the one hand, there was a ring on his little finger. A mourning ring, gold, with a plait of pale hair under glass, finer than any ring a servant buys for himself. Somebody had given him that. Then she stopped thinking about it, because he had begun to shiver in earnest, and shivering mattered, and rings did not. "What is your name, Damaris?" She waited for the second question, the one that always came next, the one that made faces close. He did not ask it. "Elias," he said. "Corvin. Lie back, Mr. Corvin." He lay back. The fire popped. Above them, the music got faster, and laughter came out of an upstairs window and went away into the cold. "There will be a doctor," said one of the coachmen, "if somebody goes up and asks." "No," said Elias. "Your arm is broke." "I know what my arm is." He said it quietly, and the man stopped talking. Elias turned his head against the brick and watched the lit windows, and Damaris watched him watch them. "He will come out himself," Elias said at last. "He always does. He will have heard the noise, and he will be counting his men in his head, and when he finds he cannot count me, he will come out." Damaris looked up at the windows. A head groom, she thought, or a steward with a temper who would want to know who had lit a torch near a team and would find somebody to be angry with, and would go back in. "Then I had better be gone before he does. Why, because I am not of the party." She said it flatly, without weight, and was surprised at herself for saying it at all. The coachman who had given up his neckcloth was a wide gray man named Wickery, who drove for a family beyond Marlbrook. He crouched to feed the fire and stayed crouching. "That was a good bit of work," he said. "I have not seen a woman go to a leader's head. I have not seen many men go to one." He tipped his chin toward the bench and did not turn his head. He would have gone under the arch, and the wheel after him. Somebody had to turn it. Aye, somebody did. Wickery pushed a piece of wood into the coals. "Do you know who that is?" Elias Corvin. Wickery laughed once, low the way men laugh when a thing has come out sideways. "He told you his name. He did not tell you the other part." Wickery nodded at the 4 blacks being walked slowly under the wall. "Near 60 years on a box. Started postilion at 9. And he has drove for one house that whole time and will not drive for another. Not for money, not for the asking. That is Ardmore's man. That is Ardmore's team. And that is Ardmore's coach with the crest painted out, because his grace does not care to be looked at on the road." The fire cracked. Above them, the music turned over into something slower. Damaris sat very still with her hands out toward the coals and did not move them. Ardmore. That was the house that had owned the bridge at Skello. That was the house that had sent a man to her mother's kitchen with a paper to sign. In the middle of the 11 days it took her father to die. She had not signed it. She was still not signing it. That was why she was sitting in a yard tonight instead of a warm room, and why there were no horses left at home at all. She turned her head and looked at the old man. His eyes were shut. The firelight moved on his face. Behind her, at the top of the yard, a door opened in the wall of the great house. The music came out of it clean and loud and unmuffled for the first time all evening, and a man came down the steps into the cold without a coat on. He came down the steps without a coat on, and he did not hurry. That was the first thing Damaris noticed, and she noticed it because everybody else in the yard began to move faster the moment the door opened. Men who had been standing straightened. Wickery rose out of his crouch by the brazier and stayed risen. The man on the steps came down them at the pace of a man crossing his own hall. He was tall and dark, and his shirt was very white in the lantern light, and the cold did not appear to have reached him yet. He went past the bench without looking at it. He went to the horses. He put his hand flat on the near leader's neck as he passed behind it, without breaking stride the way you touch a horse to tell it where you are, so it does not have to guess. He said one word to the man holding them that Damaris could not hear. The man answered. He ran his hand down the shoulder and along the foreleg and let go. Then he came to the bench. He crouched in front of it, in the wet forearms across his knees. He looked at the splinted arm. He looked at the blood at the temple. He touched neither. "Elias, it is a broken arm," said Elias Corvin. "It is not the first, no. There is no call for a fuss." "There is a considerable call for a fuss," the man said. "I am declining to make it in front of the yard." He reached out and took the edge of the horse blanket and drew it up over the old man's shoulder and settled it and took his hand away. It was a small movement. Damaris was close enough to see that his hand was not perfectly steady, and she looked away, because it was not hers to see. He took the tin cup out of her hands without appearing to notice that they were hers, and held it for Elias himself. "Who put the splint on the girl?" said Elias. "Which girl?" "That one," said Wickery. "And she went to the leader's head before she did it, sir, your grace. She had the whole team turning inside of 10 strides. I have driven 40 years, and I would not have gone in there." The man rose. He turned round. He looked at her the way a man looks at a road he has to travel. "Your name?" "Ho, Damaris Thrale." Nothing moved in his face, but something went through it, the way weather goes over a field a long way off, visible only by what it does to the grass. He was quiet for 3 breaths. She counted them without meaning to. "Thrale," he said. "Yes." "Of Marlbrook." "Of Kettlewell, near Marlbrook. There was a farm. There is still a house. I know where it is," he said. The music above them went on. The near leader shifted, and its shoe rang once on the stone and was quiet again. "You are in this yard," he said. "In December, in those shoes, and there is a ball above your head. Whose carriage did you come in? My stepmother's. And where is your stepmother? Damaris looked at him levelly. Inside. He waited. He did not fill the silence, and he did not look away while it went on, and she found she preferred that to pity. I am not of the party, she said at last. Somewhere behind her, Wickery made a small sound and turned it into a cough. The man on the cobbles did not react at all. He asked his next question in exactly the same voice as the last one. If you had known the coach was mine, he said, would you have gone to that horse's head? A man was going under an arch. That is not what I asked you. I know it is not. Then answer it. She thought about lying. It would have been easy and graceful, and it would have cost her nothing at all. I would have gone, she said, and I would have hated it. For a moment nobody in the yard said anything. Then the Duke of Ardenmoor said, Yes, I imagine you would. He turned his head. Wickery, is it, sir? Go up to the house, find a man called Bray in a green coat. Corvin is to have the blue room and the doctor from Marlbrook, not the one from here, and nobody moves him until the doctor says so. Tell him I said all of it. Wickery went at a speed he had not used in years. Ilias Corvin said from the bench, The horses want walking, Ilias. The Duke did not raise his voice. I have been putting your horses away since I was 12 years old. Be quiet. Something happened in the old man's face that was almost certainly amusement. The Duke turned back to Damaris. He looked at her a moment longer. Then he put out his arm. She looked at it. No, she said. I have not asked you anything yet. You are about to ask me into that house. I am wearing my sister's old shoes and my hands smell of horse, and there is a room up there with 200 people who will look at me exactly once and then look at each other. I would rather stand in the cold. That is a good speech, said the Duke. You have thought about it. About 4 minutes. Then think for one more. He did not lower his arm. They will look whatever I do. Every one of them heard the noise and will have the story by midnight, and by tomorrow it will have grown a tale. They may see you come in on my arm, or they may see you left in a yard. Those are the 2 stories, and one of them is going to be told tonight. You do not owe me this. No, he said. I owe it to him. He did not look at the bench when he said it. But I am not offering it to him. I am offering it to you, and you may take it or not. The cold had got past her shoes an hour ago, and was up in her knees. Above them the music stopped, and there was applause, thin through the glass, and then the shuffling of a great many people changing places on a floor. Damaris put her hand on his arm. They went up the steps. The man in the doorway had a face made for occasions like this one, and it very nearly held, and then his eyes went down to the hem of her dress, which was black with wet to the knee, and he began to speak. She is of mine, said the Duke, and went past him. The heat came at her like a wall. That was what she remembered afterward, before the light and the noise. The heat and the smell of 100 candles and hot wax and crushed flowers and people, and how her fingers began to burn as the blood came back into them. The room was long and bright, and it went quiet in a spreading way, starting near the door. They have called the supper dance, said the Duke without turning his head. Can you dance it? Badly. Good. So can I. She could not remember afterward whether she had danced it well or badly. She remembered his glove, and that his hand closed round hers, and then adjusted once very slightly to take the weight off the outside edge of her palm where the noseband had opened the skin. He did not look down, and he did not mention it. He moved his hand and left it there. She remembered a woman in dark green who did not stop staring, and twice the top of her stepmother's head across the room, and the particular way Drusilla was holding her chin, which was not level and was not pleasant. She remembered that he did not speak for the first half of it, and that the silence was not awkward. Then, near the end, without any change in his face, he said, You told me in the yard you would have hated it. Going to the horse for me. I did. I should like to know why. You know why. I know a version of why, he said. I would rather have yours. The music turned, they turned with it. 4 men went into the water at the Skello Bridge, Damaris said. 2 years ago, in the spring. 3 came out. My father was one of the 3. He was in his bed 11 days, and then he was not. And in the middle of those 11 days, a man came to our kitchen with a paper and a sum of money written on it, and a line at the bottom for a name, and the paper said no fault lay anywhere at all. And I would not sign it, and I have not signed it since. She had said it to her stepmother and to her sister, and to the vicar, and, once, very badly, to a shopkeeper. She had never yet said it, and not been answered before she had finished. The Duke of Ardmore said nothing, for 8 full beats of the music. Then he said, "What paper?" The kitchen at Kettlewell had a flagged floor that never came warm, and a table her father had made, and one window that faced the paddock, where there had once been horses. Mr. Pell came on a Thursday. He was a neat, dry, pleasant man, with ink on his second finger, and he took off his hat at the door and asked after her father's comfort before anything else, and was sorry, and said so twice. He put the paper on the table and turned it round to face her. She was 20. Then she had been 20, for 9 days. The sum at the top was enough to keep the farm and the horses and the roof, and enough besides to bury a man properly when the time came, which the whole house understood was coming. Under it 4 lines of small clear writing said the bridge at Skello had been in good repair, that the accident was an act of God and of the weather, and that no negligence attached to the estate of Ardmore, nor to any person in its employment then or thereafter. Under that there was a line for a name. Her stepmother stood at the end of the table with both hands on the back of a chair. Her father was upstairs, and they could hear him through the floor, and he had 11 days left, and none of them knew it. Damaris asked whether the bridge had been in good repair. Mr. Pell said that the paper said so. She asked him again. Mr. Pell folded his hands and said very kindly that a person could spend the money, or could spend 2 years, and a great deal she did not have finding out, and that in his experience people were happier who spent the money. She said no. She had thought, at the time, that it was the hardest thing she would ever do. It was not. The hardest thing was every day afterward. The music ended. There is a moment at the end of a dance when a room decides what it has just seen. It takes about as long as a breath, and it cannot be argued with afterward. Damaris stood in the middle of the floor with her hand still on the Duke's arm and listened to it happen. It sounded like 200 people not saying anything, and then at the edges, beginning to, "Do not look at them," said the Duke, very low. "Look at me. It is the only thing that will be reported accurately. Your Grace, I am going to ask you about that paper. I know. Not here." He had not let go of her hand. "There are 9 people in this room who will reach me before the door. I am not walking away from what you have told me. I am walking through a room. People generally do. Miss Thrale, I understand you," she said. He let go. He bowed to her, correctly, in front of everybody, which was worse than anything else he could have done, and which she understood was the point. Then the room came in. It came as a widening ring of faces and a great deal of noise, and the woman in dark green got to him first. With a hand on his sleeve, and after that Damaris could see only the back of his head. She turned to find the wall. The wall was a long way off. She went toward it through a crowd that opened for her and closed behind her, and did not once look at her directly. And she heard perhaps 4 words in every 10. The drowned man. Kettlewell. Would not sign. Well, she has signed something tonight. Her stepmother was already coming across the floor at the smooth, unhurried speed of a woman who has decided to be pleasant in public. Drusilla's smile arrived well before she did. Octavia got there first. Her sister stood in front of her with her hands twisted at her waist and her face the color of paper, and she opened her mouth, and what came out was not what Damaris had spent 2 years. expecting to hear. "Your hands are bleeding," Octavia said. "I know. On your dress. I know, Octavia." Her sister held her eyes a second longer. Then she stepped aside because her mother had arrived. But Damaris was not looking at her stepmother. Standing by the door at the far end of the room, quite still, with a glass in his hand and his hat already under his arm as though he had been on the point of leaving all evening, was a neat, dry, pleasant man with gray in his hair. He was looking straight at her. He had been looking at her, she understood, for some time. Mr. Pell put down his glass on the tray of a passing servant. He did it carefully, the way he did everything. Then he went out through the door and did not come back. "Damaris," said her stepmother, arriving radiant in front of the whole room, "fetch your cloak." The carriage went down the drive at a walk and out onto the Marlbrook Road, and for 2 miles nobody said anything. Damaris sat with her cloak across her knees and watched her own breath go white and disappear. Her hands had stopped bleeding and started throbbing, which is the order. Those things come in. Octavia was pressed into the far corner with her eyes shut, not asleep. "Well," said Drusilla at last. Damaris waited. "I have been thinking about it for 3 miles, and I find that I am not angry, because anger is a waste, and because you did not plan it. You have never planned anything in your life. That is rather the difficulty." Drusilla arranged her gloves in her lap, finger by finger. "So, we will be practical instead. Do you know what happens in January? The lease on the paddock. The lease on the paddock and Bowman's account and the interest on your father's note to the bank at Malbrook, all inside a fortnight. I have known since August. I did not tell you because it would have achieved nothing except that you would have gone about the house with a face." She looked out of the window. "In January, this family has £90 to find, and 40 of it does not exist. Tonight you were seen. That is a thing with a value, and it will keep about a month before it goes off like fish. So you will not write to that house. You will not answer if that house writes to you. You will do nothing until I tell you what to do, and then you will do exactly that. And we may none of us be in a rented room in Marlbrook by Lady Day. He is not going to write to me. Of course he is going to write to you." Drusilla said it without any heat, the way a woman states the price of coal. "He bowed to you in front of 200 people. Men do not do that, and then think no more about it." Octavia opened her eyes and shut them again. Damaris looked at the black hedges going by. "Ma'am, may I ask you something?" "You may." "Who sent Mr. Pell?" There was a pause of exactly the wrong length. "The estate sent him," said Drusilla. "He says there was no paper." "Who says?" "Arden Moore." Drusilla turned her head. In the dark of the carriage, her face was only a shape, but the shape had gone very still, and it stayed still for longer than a woman is still when a thing is simply nonsense to her. "Then he is lying," she said. "Or he is a fool, and I have never yet met a duke who was the second thing." She did not speak again for the rest of the road. The house at Kettlewell was cold in the way a house gets when there has been no fire in it since morning, which is a different cold from outside and worse, too. Damaris went up with a candle, got out of the ruined dress, put it over the chair, and did not look at it. Then she knelt and took up the loose board under the window and brought out the tin box with her mother's letters in it, and her father's stud book, and the paper. She had kept it for 2 years because it was the only thing she owned that proved any of it had happened. She had never once looked at the bottom of it. The letter came on the second day, brought by a boy on a cob, 4 lines long. "Miss Thrale, Elias Corvin is mending and asks after you, which he will deny. Separately, I have a question I cannot ask by letter. If you still have the paper, bring it. Bring it yourself. Say nothing to anyone about bringing it. Ardmore." Damaris read it in the yard with the wind pulling at the corner of it. Her stepmother read it in the kitchen twice, and then a third time. "He does not mention your dress. He does not mention the dance. He does not compliment you on anything whatever," Drusilla said. "This is not a letter from a man thinking about a woman. It is from a man who is frightened about something. Damaris, Drusilla put it down on the table between them. Take the paper. Ardenmore Hall sat at the top of a rise with beeches down both sides of the approach, and it was not beautiful, and Damaris had not expected that. It was large and plain and old, and looked like a place added to by people who did not care what the neighbors thought. The hall floor was stone, and the stone was cold through her boots inside 6 steps. There was a smell of wood smoke and damp plaster and, under it, beeswax. Her own footsteps came back at her off a ceiling she did not look up at. The man in the green coat was called Bray, and he was about 50, and he did not look at her hem, which she noticed and was grateful for. "His Grace is in the estate office, miss. He asks that you go to Mr. Corvin first. Is that his order or your idea?" Bray's face did not move. "Mr. Corvin's, miss. The blue room had a fire in it that would have heated the whole of Kettlewell." Elias Corvin was propped in a bed, too grand for him, in a nightshirt too grand for him, with his arms strapped and his color better, and an expression of profound irritation. "They have put me in here," he said by way of greeting. "There is a bell," said Damaris. "Ring it once while I am here, so that I may see it done." He made a low sound in his chest that in a younger man would have been a laugh, and did not ring it. There was a child in the window seat. Damaris had not seen her, because the child was very still, and the curtain came half across her, and she sat with her knees up, and a book she was not reading. She was about 9, with a thin face and dark eyes and hair somebody had done rapidly and without love. "That is Thomason," said Elias. "That is the whole trouble of this house in one person." "Tamsin," said the child. "Tamsin, I am Damaris." "I know." "You turned the grays." "They are black, Tamsin agreed. "But Elias says a horse is only ever the color of the day you got it." She put the book down. "Did you really go in front, and to the side?" Damaris sat down on the end of the bed, which was not correct, and did not get up again, because if you go to the wheel horse you are hauling on the back of a thing that is already decided. The decision is at the front. It is always at the front. Tamsin thought about that with an attention that was slightly unnerving. "I am not allowed in the stable yard," she said. "Who does not allow it?" Nobody. Nobody says a word about it at all. It is only that I do not go." The fire moved. Elias Corvin looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who has heard a conversation before and does not intend to have it again. There was a portrait over the chimney-piece of a fair woman on a gray horse, painted out of doors with the beeches behind her and her hat in her hand. She had been painted laughing at somebody standing where the painter was not. Damaris looked at it for slightly too long. "That is my mother," said Tamsin. "She died when I was 6. She is buried at the church, and there is a stone, and I have seen it." She said it in one breath, in the flat, rehearsed way of a child who has learned that if she gets it out quickly, the adults do not have to do the part where they change their faces. "Thank you for telling me," said Damaris. "Will you take me to see them?" said Tamsin. "The blacks. Yes, now, when you like." The child looked at the window and then at her lap. "Not now," she said. The estate office was at the cold end of the house, one small window and 400 books of accounts, and the Duke of Ardenmore had apparently not left it in days. He was in his shirt sleeves. The fire had been let go out. The table was covered end to end, in ledgers laid open and weighted flat with whatever had come to hand, a paperweight, an inkstand, a boot. He straightened when she came in. "Miss Thrale, Your Grace, you have it." She took the paper out of her father's stud book and put it on the table. He did not snatch at it. He turned it round with 2 fingers and read it from the top, slowly, all the way down, and then read it again, and she watched him do it, and could not have said one thing about what he was feeling, except that at some point he put both hands flat on the table on either side of it. "There is a chair under those." She moved a pile of survey books onto the floor and sat. "I will not tell you what I have found," he said. "You will not believe me. You will believe the ledgers. Can you read an account? My father kept his own for 30 years. Read that one. The column on the right. She read it. The general disbursement book for the spring of 2 years ago. A line in a small, neat hand said against a sum, Compassionate Settlement, Skello, and a date. It was one of 11 such lines running into the following winter. 11, she said. 4 men went into the water, 3 widows, 2 mothers, a brother in Norfolk, a man who watched it from the bank and said so in a public house, a schoolmaster who wrote to a newspaper in Leeds that never printed it. He put his finger on the page without touching the ink, all out of the contingency fund which exists so a roof can be mended in February without anybody waiting on me, all signed off by the agent, which is proper because the agent may disperse from it, and not one of them large enough to need my signature because the man who set the sums knew that limit to £1. Damaris turned the page. There were more. You never saw it. I never looked, he said. He said it flatly and without any softening at all. And then he waited, and she understood, watching him wait, that he had decided in advance not to be defended. I signed the general accounts every Michaelmas, he said. 9 minutes, in this room, with a glass of something. My father did it in the same chair, and his father before him, and there is a word for that arrangement, and it is not tradition. He moved a ledger aside. There is worse. It was a survey book, bound, foxed, older. 2 years before the bridge, he said. The county surveyor came over the whole estate, 20 pages of it. Turned to the 4th. She turned to the 4th page and read the entry for the crossing at Skello. The 2 main string timbers were sound at the ends and unsound at the heart. The heart of a timber cannot be seen and can only be sounded. They should be drawn out and replaced within 2 seasons. In the margin, in the same small, neat hand, was written one word: deferred. Damaris sat with the book open on her knees. The room was extremely cold. Somewhere a door shut, and somebody went along a passage, and the sound went away. Your father, said Cassian. He told them. Her voice came out perfectly steady, which surprised her. He kept a hunter of Mr. Pell's at livery. He went over that crossing twice a week for 6 years with a horsebox behind him, and he could hear it. He said the note had gone off. That was his word. Off. He told Mr. Pell in the January, and again in the March, and Pell said it would be looked at, and in April it went into the water with 4 men on it, and afterward my father lay upstairs for 11 days and could not get his breath or his words, and the one he kept getting out was that he had told them. He said it to me perhaps 40 times. And the doctor said a man in that condition says things, and my stepmother said it, and the vicar said it too kindly, and every one of them was quite certain and quite gentle about it. She closed the survey book. Mr. Pell came on the 9th day, and the paper said the bridge had been in good repair, and I understood that if I put my name at the bottom of it, that would be the end. Not the money. The other thing. There would be nothing left in the world that said my father had told them, and he would be a man who said things because he was dying. The fire had been out for hours. Cassian had not moved. So no, said Damaris. It was never about the sum. I would have taken the sum. I have wanted it every day for 2 years, and wanted it hardest on the days I was hungry. But I could not buy the farm with the only true thing I had. Nobody said anything for some while. Miss Thrale, he said at last, I want to be careful here, because I think if I say this badly, you will get up and go, and you would be right to say it. I have been in this room since Tuesday, and I have not been sitting here thinking about your father. I have been finding out that I have owned a wrong for 2 years, done in my name, with my money, by a man I appointed, and that the only reason it worked is that I am the sort of man who signs 9 minutes of accounts in a comfortable chair. He turned his hand over. I am not ashamed on your behalf. I have no right to that. I am ashamed on my own, and would rather you had it from me than worked it out later. Damaris looked at the ledgers. What will happen to Mr. Pell? P left Malbrook on Sunday night with 2 boxes and has not been seen since. Bray has men on it. He said it without any particular temperature. What I want out of him is not a confession. It is a list. Then, you need somebody who can read a land agent's accounts. I need somebody who knows what a bad timber sounds like, and what a farm costs to keep, and what £9 means in a kitchen in November, and who is not one of my people, and whom nobody in this county can buy. He looked up. I know how that sounds. I am the second man in 2 years to ask you to put your name to something about the Skello Bridge. Yes, said Damaris. You are. You may say no now, you may say yes now, and no in a fortnight. Nothing happens to you or your family either way, and I will put that in writing if you want it. She thought about her stepmother saying, take the paper. She thought about £90 and 40 of it not existing. She thought about a child in a window seat who did not go to the stable yard and could not say why. I will tell you tomorrow, she said. That is a good answer. It is not an answer at all. No, he said, but it is a good one. She told him yes on the Thursday, and after that the winter went differently. She came to Ardmore 3 days a week. Bray sent the gig and stopped pretending after the second week that it happened to be going that way. She worked at a table of her own with a lamp and went through 10 years of a man's handwriting. It was slow and mostly nothing. 4 hours would give her a column of figures meaning a fence had been mended. Then there would be a Tuesday, in a bad October, where £60 had gone on drainage for a field Damaris had walked over as a girl and knew had never been drained, and she would write the page number on a slip and put it in the box. Ike box got heavier. They talked about nothing but the work for a while, and then about other things, because 2 people cannot sit in a room for 3 months and discuss only drainage. He told her about a mare who would not be caught by anybody but a boy of 12 who had left. She told him her father's method for a horse that would not load, which took 4 days. And no shouting. He never once asked her about the ball and she was grateful. And then not sure she was grateful. Tamsin came in most afternoons and sat on the floor with her back against the bookcase and drew things. The county talked. Damaris knew it because Octavia came home from Marbrook white about the mouth twice, and because the vicar's wife called at Kettlewell for the first time in 2 years and asked a great many pleasant questions. Drusilla answered everyone with enormous satisfaction. It was not possible. She knew it in the way you know. The ground is there. He was a duke. She was a bankrupt's daughter with 2 dresses. There had been 1 dance in December, and that dance had been an act of decency in front of witnesses, and she had watched him be decent to a dozen other people since, and had learned exactly how much it meant. She went on going 3 days a week anyway. In the last week of March, the wind came round to the south and stayed there, and on the Thursday, it rained for 19 hours without stopping, and the thaw came off the moor all at once. I want to see it, Damaris said. See what, Skello? You have read what the surveyor wrote. I want you to have seen the timber. The water is coming up. Then we had better go this morning. They rode down the old lane with 2 of the estate men behind them, left the horses at the top, and went down the bank on foot. 2 years of weather had taken the decking. What stood was the near abutment, and, jammed against it, at an angle in the brown water, one of the 2 mainstring timbers, 30 feet of oak gone black and furred over. The river was not the river she remembered. It was up over the willow roots and running the color of tea, and it made a low, continuous sound she felt in her feet before she heard it. There were men on the bank. 6 or 7 of the estates, and a cart, and a plank walkway run out along the abutment that morning to get at a fall of stone before the water took it. She went down to the timber. Bring me an axe. One of the men laughed. Caution said nothing, and a different man fetched one. She took it at the head close, the way her father took an axe, and put 4 cuts into the black outer face where the grain went wrong. The 4th went in and kept going. She turned the axe and pulled out a fistful of oak that came away like wet bread. That is the heart of it, she said. That is what he could hear. A sound timber rings. This one had gone dumb 2 years before it broke, and any man who drove a loaded box over it twice a week for 6 years would have known. Nobody on the bank said anything. Cassian took the rotten wood out of her hand and turned it over and did not put it down. Then the water changed its note. It got lower and louder the way it does, and somebody up the bank shouted, and the surge came round the bend carrying half a hedge in front of it. The plank walkway had 3 men on it. "Off," Cassian said. "Off." Now 2 of them got off. The third was at the far end with a crowbar, and he turned to come back, and the walkway lifted under him and went sideways, and he came down on the planks and was carried out into the brown water on the whole raft of it, still holding on. Damaris was already at the horses. She came back with the long rein off one bridle and the leading rein off the other, knotted onto it, and went out along the abutment, which was slick and slanted and had nothing to hold, and she did not go fast, because a person who slips saves nobody. "Take the end and put your foot in the stone." He took it. She did not look again. She knelt on the last stone and watched the raft come round, and judged it the way you judge a horse coming at you fast, which is by where it is going to be and not by where it is. She swung the rein once and let it go long. He got a hand to it. Then the other. The rein came tight, and the whole weight of the river came onto it, and Damaris took the surge across her shoulder and her arm and her open hand, and the rein went through her palm about 6 inches and stopped, because Cassian Rook had put both fists round it, a yard behind her, and his boot into the stone and his whole body against the pull. They brought him in along the face of the abutment, hand over hand. He went under once and came up further along and did not let go, and one of the estate men got into the shallows and dragged him onto the stones by the collar. He was sick. He breathed. He told the river what he thought of it. He would be all right. Damaris sat down on the wet stone and looked at her hand, which had opened along the old line from the noseband and along a new one, and thought quite calmly that she would have to explain this to her stepmother. Cassian sat down a yard off on the same cold stone, with his boots in the water and his coat ruined and the fistful of rotten oak still jammed in his pocket. Neither of them said anything for a while. The river went on. "That is twice," he said at last. "Twice I have watched you go toward the front of a thing." "There is nowhere else to go," she said. Up at the top of the lane where the beeches began, a carriage had stopped on the road. It was not one of the estates. It stood a while with its horses steaming in the cold, nobody getting out of it. Then it turned and went back toward Ardenmoor. The note came to Kettlewell on the Saturday, on paper heavy enough to stand up by itself. "Miss Thrale is desired at Ardenmoor Hall on Monday, at noon. Adeline Varel." That was all of it, no greeting. Nothing that could be answered, because nothing in it was a question. Drusilla turned it over twice, looking for more, and did not find any. "That is the mother," she said. His wife's. The Dowager Countess of Varel, who has a house in Bath and another in London, and has been burying people of consequence for 40 years. She put the note down with care. That was her carriage at the top of the lane at Skello. "I would put money on it. You have no money. I would put yours." Her stepmother looked at her with something that was not unkindness. "You will not win this one. I want you to know it going in, so that you do not think afterward that you might have. I know. Then wear the grey." Lady Adeline Varel received her in a morning room at Ardenmoor that Damaris had not known existed at the south end of the house where the sun came in. She did not rise. She was tall and very upright, and about 70, in dark green, with a face that had been handsome so long it had never learned any other way to arrange itself. Damaris recognized her at once, because the last time she had seen that face had been looking at her across a ballroom and not stopping. "Sit down, Miss Thrale." Damaris sat. "You will take tea?" That was not entirely an offer. Lady Varel poured 2 cups and put one in front of her. "Drink it, or do not, but hold it." A woman with something in her hands is easier to talk to. Damaris held it. Good. I am going to say a number of things you will find offensive, and I do not enjoy it, and am not doing it out of malice. She set down the pot. You saved a man's life in a stable yard in December, and another at Skello last week, and on both occasions did what nobody else was willing to do. That is why you are sitting in this room, instead of being turned away at the door. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Lady Varel folded her hands. Cassian means to publish what you have found in that office. Do you know what it cost? Mr. Pell his liberty, I should think. Mr. Pell is a clerk who ran to Liverpool with 2 boxes, and nobody in England will care about him for a fortnight. I am asking what it costs this house. She leaned forward very slightly. An inquest reopened. 4 families with counsel. A coroner's court at Marbrook with a duke in the box. My granddaughter's name in a column beside the words negligence and death at 9 years old, forever. And a man who admits his own house killed 4 laborers does not get to be a duke afterward in any way that matters. He will be received. He will not be listened to. He will feel the difference for 30 years. Then he should not have let it happen. No, said Lady Varel quite readily. I am not defending him. I am telling you the price of what you have persuaded him to do. I did not persuade him. He found it himself, and I read it after. You are the reason he looked. Damaris put the cup down now. Lady Varel reached to a small table beside her and took up a folded sheet and laid it flat on the cloth between them and turned it round so that it faced Damaris. Damaris did not touch it. She had gone entirely cold from the wrists up. An annuity of £80, said Lady Varel, for life, not contingent on marriage, which is unusual and deliberate. The Kettlewell debts discharged, the lease of a furnished house at Bath, and a letter from me, worth more than any of it, to a family in Somerset who want a woman to manage a stud and cannot find one. And in return, you will stop coming to this house. The clock on the chimney-piece went on. A blackbird went up and down outside the window on the gravel. I am not asking you to stop the inquiry, said Lady Varel. It will happen. I know when I have lost an argument. I am asking you to remove yourself, because by June this county will not be talking about a bridge. It will be talking about a farmer's daughter, and every word it says about her will attach to every word it says about the men who drowned. That is how a true thing gets made ridiculous, and in my experience it is the only way one ever does. Damaris looked at the paper for a long moment. Do you know, she said, you are the second person to put a paper on a table in front of me and explain very kindly why I should sign it. I have been aware of it since I sat down. It is why I did not send Bray with it in an envelope. I do not do things behind my hands. Lady Varel's chin came up. And Mr. Pell's paper was a lie. Mine is entirely true. Every figure on it will be honored whatever you say to me in the next 5 minutes. That is worse. That is what I thought you would say. Damaris looked out of the window at the gravel and the blackbird and the beeches beyond. May I ask you one thing before I answer? You may ask your daughter. Came off a horse on the Marbrook Road. Lady Varel did not move at all. A grey mare, 4 years old, bought in the spring. She lived 9 days. Damaris turned back. Who passed that mare? Fit. The clock went on. Nobody buys a duchess a horse at a fair, said Damaris. It comes through the agent, and the agent takes the commission, and the agent says what is sound. There is a column for it. I have been reading that column since December. She kept her voice exactly where it was. I am not telling you anything. Was wrong? I do not know. I have not looked, because it is not mine to look at. I am asking whether you have ever, in 3 years, asked the question. Lady Ottiline Varel's hand on the arm of her chair had closed until the knuckles stood up white. Get out of my chair, she said. It is not your chair. Get out of it. Damaris stood up. She left the paper where it was, in the middle of the cloth, facing her. I will tell you what I mean to do, she said, Because you have been honest, and it would be poor manners not to. I will go on, going to that office until the work is finished. Because there are 4 families in this county who have been told for 2 years that their men died of the weather. I have never asked him for anything, and I never shall. But I will not be paid to leave a room. I have had that offer once. It cost me 2 years, and a farm, and I do not mean to sell it now at a better price. She got as far as the door. He gave me his word, said Lady Varel. Damaris stopped. At the graveside, in the October. The old woman had not turned round. She was looking at the paper on the cloth. He was 30 and not able to speak properly, and I asked him, and what he gave me was that while I lived, he would not put another woman in Aveline's place. I asked because I was frightened. A man of that age does not stay a widower, and I could not bear to watch a stranger walk about this house wearing my daughter's keys. She smoothed her skirt. It was a wicked thing to ask a man at a graveside. I knew it while I was asking. He has never mentioned it since. Why are you telling me? Because he came to me 11 days ago and asked to be released from it, said Lady Varel, and I refused him. And you were going to find that out from somebody, and I would rather it was from me, and correctly. She turned her head at last. Now go away, Miss Thrale. Damaris walked the length of the south passage, and down the great stair, and out past Bray, who opened the door and said nothing whatever, and down the beach avenue onto the road. A quarter of a mile along there was a gate. She went through it, and put her back against the wall where the road could not see her, and stood a while with her hands over her face. Then she wiped her face on her sleeve and walked the 5 miles to Kettlewell, told her stepmother she had refused, and went upstairs. 11 days. She counted them the way she had counted a set of 11 days before, which she had not expected and did not like. On the first, she told herself he was busy. On the second, she told herself the gig always came on Tuesdays, and Tuesday was not until tomorrow. On the third, the gig did not come. There was no letter, and no message by a boy on a cob, and Bray did not appear at the door with anything in his hand. On the 6th day, Octavia came into the kitchen where Damaris was blacking the range and stood about a while and finally said, "You could write to him." And Damaris said no, and Octavia said, "Why not?" And Damaris said, "Because if he has decided a letter from me only makes him say it, and I would rather not make anybody say it." Octavia thought about that. Then she picked up a cloth and did the other half of the range without being asked, which she had never done in her life. On the 9th day, the paper came out of the loose board under the window and went back again. On the 11th day, Damaris walked to Cadre. The great gates at the end of the Cadre drive stood open, because there was nobody left in the house to shut them. The family had gone to London, and the shutters were up on the whole south front, and the raked gravel of December had grass coming through it in a line down the middle where no wheel went anymore. Damaris walked up the drive and round into the yard. It was a small place in daylight. That was the first surprise. In December, it had been a country with lanterns at the far end that belonged to a different parish. Now she could see across the whole of it in one look, perhaps 40 yards long, and the stables were shut. The cobbles had chickweed in the joints. The arch-a-man had very nearly gone under, was only an arch, with old whitewash and a swallow's nest in the corner, and a great deal of light coming through from the other side. The brazier was gone. The bench was still against the brick, except the brick was not warm, and she sat down on the end where he had sat. It smelled of nothing at all. No horse, no coal smoke, no wet straw, no wax, dry stone and nettles. She sat a long time with her hands loose in her lap. The swallows went in and out. Beyond the wall a cuckoo was going, over and over. She thought about how she had stood at the end of this yard in a wet dress with her hands full of somebody else's blood, and had not once considered that she might come to harm from it. She was still thinking that, when she heard the horse, it came up the drive at a walk and stopped, and there was the small, unmistakable sound of a man getting down and looping a rein over something, then boots on gravel, and then on cobble. Damaris did not stand up. He came round the corner of the stable block, stopped when he saw her, and stayed there, a good way off, which she understood perfectly. He looked as if he had been sleeping badly for 11 days. "Bray said you had gone to Marlbrook," he said. "The woman at the turnpike said you had gone toward Caudray and not come back. I have been to the church, the mill, and both bridges. How long have you been looking?" "Since about 9. Damaris looked at the ground. "You had better sit down." Then he came and sat on the far end of the bench with a yard of cold brick between them and put his forearms on his knees, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. "I owe you 11 days, he said. Pell was taken at Liverpool on the 2nd of them, with a ticket for New York and £800 in a portmanteau full of paper, and the paper is what matters. It is not 11 payments. It is 19, and it runs back before my father died. 19, 19, he said it evenly. The inquest at Marlbrook is reopened. I asked for it myself in writing, and it sits on the 12th of June. The survey book goes in, and the timber you cut out, and the contingency book. And me, for a day and possibly 2. He turned his hand over. The third thing is the one I came about. He reached into his coat and brought out a folded sheet and held it, and did not hand it over. On the 7th day, the coroner's officer took a statement from my head stud groom, a man named Hobie. He stated on oath that in the January before the bridge went, Roland Thrale of Kettlewell stopped him on the Skellow Lane and told him the timbers had gone dumb and asked him to carry it to the office, because Thrale had carried it twice himself and got nowhere. And Hobie carried it, and Mr. Pell told him it would be looked at. Damaris did not move. "It is sworn and signed and entered," said Cassian, "and on the 12th of June a coroner is going to read it out loud in a public room in Marlbrook, and after that there will not be one person in this county who can say your father said things because he was dying." He put the folded sheet down on the cold brick between them. "That is a copy. It is yours. I could have sent it. I did not want it coming to that house in an envelope with your stepmother in the room." Damaris picked it up. She read 4 lines, and then could not read any more, and sat with it open on her knee looking across the yard at the arch with the swallow's nest in it. "He told them," she said. "He told them 3 times. Everybody in that house heard me say it for 2 years. Yes, and now the county will hear a stranger say it on oath, and that is worth a great deal more. And it is the most unjust thing in the whole business, and I am sorry." Beyond the wall the cuckoo went on. "That is 3 things," Damaris said. "You said 11 days. The rest I spent trying to find a way to say the last part, and I have not found one, so I will say it badly." He straightened. "I have been to Lady Varel twice, once before Skello, once the day after she saw you. She said no both times, and the second time in a way I do not think a third asking will improve. I know about the promise. She did it well. She did it correctly. I have thought about it a great deal, and I cannot find the place where she was cruel. There is not one. That is the difficulty with her." He looked at his hands. "I gave her my word at my wife's grave, and I am not going to break it. A man in my position saying he cannot do a thing is very often a man who has decided not to, and I would rather you did not spend a year wondering which sort I am. If I broke it to have you, I would be handing you a man who breaks promises to get what he wants, and you of all people in England should not be asked to take that." "No," said Damaris. "So I am not asking you anything." He said it steadily. "I came to bring you Hobie's statement, and to tell you I am not able to offer you anything at all, and that I know a man who says he cannot offer, and then sits on a bench and says it slowly, is doing something rather worse than offering." "I have thought about that too." The swallows went across the yard and out under the arch. "May I say something now?" said Damaris, "please. When I was 20 and Mr. Pell put that paper on my mother's table, I thought I knew exactly what I was refusing. I thought I was refusing Ardenmore, and I have gone on thinking it for 2 years, Because it is a great deal easier to hate a house than to be honest. She turned the statement over in her hands. But I was not refusing your house. Your house had never done anything to me. It did not know I existed, no. I was refusing to be told what was true by people who had not looked. She looked up. My stepmother had not looked. The doctor had not. The vicar had not. Mr. Pell had looked and lied, which is a different sin and an easier one to be angry about. Every one of them was perfectly kind and perfectly certain, and not one of them went down to the water and put an axe into the timber. She held up the folded sheet. "You looked," she said. Cassian Rook did not say anything. "That is all it ever was," said Damaris. "That is the whole of it. I have spent 2 years believing that what I wanted was for somebody to pay us, and what I wanted was for somebody to go and look." She put the statement down on the brick. "Now the other part, and you will have to sit still for it, because you have made me sit still for a great deal today." She turned toward him. "Lady Varell's word was that you would not put another woman in Aveline's place. I have thought about that sentence for 11 days, and I do not want Aveline's place. I would not take it if it were offered. I never met her. She was laughing at somebody when they painted her, and she gave your coachman the ring he wears, and her daughter says her name in one breath like a lesson, so that nobody has to be embarrassed. I am not going to walk about that house wearing her keys. Damaris, I have not finished." Her voice was not entirely level now, and she went on anyway. "I do not need you to break anything for me. I am not going to be the thing a man broke his word over. But you have been sitting on that end of the bench for a quarter of an hour, working out how not to ask me something, and I want you to know that if you were ever free to ask it, the answer would not be the one I gave the last time somebody from your house put something in front of me." The yard was very quiet. Somewhere in the stable a swallow came in fast under the arch and out again. He turned toward her. "May I take your hand?" he said. "Yes." He took it and turned it over, palm up, in the light. There were 2 lines across it. The old one ran from the base of the thumb, thin and white now, and puckered where the noseband leather had opened it in December. The new one crossed it almost at a right angle, still pink and hard, where the rain had gone through under the whole weight of a flooded river. He looked at it a long time. He said nothing about it. He did not kiss it. He put his thumb very lightly along the older of the 2 scars, once, from one end to the other, then closed her fingers over both and folded his own hand round the outside. "I will wait," he said. "I know. It may be years. She is 71, and her mother lived to 90. "I have counted 11 days twice in my life," said Damaris. "I am not frightened of years. They sat on the cold brick with the swallows going over until the light began to go." Then he put her up on the horse and walked at its head the 5 miles to Kettlewell because there was one horse, and he did not suggest any other arrangement, and neither of them said very much. It did not take years. It took 9 weeks, and it did not happen because anybody argued. In the 2nd week of June, 4 days before the inquest sat, Damaris worked in the estate office until dark, and then took the gig out to the Verrill house at Caudray Ash without telling anybody where she was going. She did not bring an argument. She brought 2 pages torn from a commission book, a receipt, and a dealer's name at Ripon. "I told you I had not looked," she said. "That was true in April. It is not true now." Lady Ottoline Verrell read the pages standing up in the hall, without asking her to sit, and it took a long time. The gray mare had come through Pell, and Pell had taken a commission from the dealer as well as from the estate, which a man does when he wants the horse sold rather than the horse right. There was no proof the mare was unsound and never would be. There was only the fact that no veterinary had ever been paid to look at her, and an entry saying, "1 had." Whether it would have made any difference, said Damaris, I do not know and will not pretend to. She may have come off a sound horse. Women do. Lady Verrell's face had not changed at all. Why have you brought me this? Because you asked me in April what a true thing costs, and you were right about the price and wrong about the arithmetic." Damaris took her gloves out of her pocket. "And because, for 3 years, you have been the only person in that house who did not ask, and I do not think it was because you did not care." She was at the door when the old woman spoke. "You are not what I took you for. You are worse. I took you for a girl who had been lucky at the side of a river. You are the other kind, the kind that finds things out and then comes and stands in a hall with it." She folded the pages precisely along the crease. "It is a most uncomfortable quality in a woman, and I do not know what to do with you at all." The letter releasing him came to Ardenmore on the Tuesday. It was 3 lines long and contained no expression of goodwill of any kind. They were married at Marbrook Church in September, after the inquest, which is to say after the county had spent a summer talking about timber and 19 payments, and a duke who stood in a box for a day and a half and answered everything he was asked. Drusilla wept and was for once not performing. Octavia held the flowers. Elias Corvin walked in on his own 2 feet and would not be given a chair. Tamsin stood at the front in blue, with her hands behind her back, watching everything with the terrible attention of a child taking notes. Lady Adeline Varel came, in dark green, and sat in the 2nd row, and gave nothing away whatever. She spoke to Damaris once, afterward, on the gravel. "You will call me Adeline. Thank you. Do not thank me. I do not like you, and I do not propose to begin at my age." She drew her gloves through her fingers. "But this county listens to what people call one another, and to nothing else. If it hears you call me Lady Varel, it will draw a conclusion, and the conclusion will be wrong, and it will hold it for 20 years. She looked out at the churchyard. "So you will call me Adeline, and I shall call you Damaris, and we will both find it disagreeable, and the county may hang itself." It was the last week of August, more than a year later, when Damaris found out about the mares. She had gone down to the far paddocks with Hobie to look at a 2-year-old with a puffy hock. The hock took 10 minutes, and then Hobie did not walk back up with her. He stood at the gate looking at the next field, along which was rough grass with a bit of thorn in it, and in the middle of it 2 very old bay mares standing head to tail in the flies. "That is a poor field," said Damaris. "It is," Hobie agreed. "They have had it 2 years and will not come off it. We tried them in the home paddock, and they walked the fence for 3 days and would not settle, so they went back." "Whose are they?" Hobie went on looking at the field. "They are yours, your grace." In a manner of speaking, Damaris turned her head. "That is Bramble, and that is Lantern," said Hobie. "They are your father's mares. The wind came along the hedge and went away." "There were 9 head in that sale," said Hobie. "September, the year the bridge went. I drove the cart. Everybody in 3 counties knew why it was happening, and there is a sort of man who comes to a sale like that. The young ones went well enough. Then they brought out those 2 16 and 17 and their work done, and there is only one sort of buyer for a mare of 17. Damaris put both hands on the top rail. "His Grace bought the lot," said Hobie, "the whole 9 in one bid before the ring got going, and paid over the odds on the young ones by a third, which everybody remarked on and nobody could do anything about. The 2 old ones came home in my cart, and he told me to put them out and not trouble him about them again." Hobie scratched his ear. "Near 3 years ago, he has never once come down to look at them. I have watched for it." "Did he know my father?" "Know him?" Hobie looked at her for the first time. "Bought off him 12 year. Every carriage horse on this estate worth its corn come out of Kettlewell. Your father bred the sort that stands still while a fool does something stupid, and there is not 1 man in 50 can do it." He nodded at the further field where 4 black horses were grazing along the hedge in the sun. "Them 4 are out of Lantern. Same mare, 4 years running, all 4 by the Rippin' Horse. That is the team, your grace. That is the team you turned in the yard at Caudray." Damaris stood at the gate a long while after Hobie went back up. She said nothing about it that night, or the next week, or the week after. She said it in October, by the fire in the small room at the West End, that they used because the rest of the house was too large to heat honestly. Tamsin was upstairs. It was raining. "Bramble and lantern," she said. Cassian did not look up from his book, The Old Mares. "You bought them. I bought a lot of 9 horses at a sale. There was no way to buy 7. You paid 1/3 over on the young ones. They were worth it. Hobie says they were not. Hobie is a pessimist about a young horse and always has been." He turned a page. "It is one of his few faults." Damaris looked at him for a while. "You have never been down to see them?" "No." "Why not?" Cassian Rook turned another page, at exactly the same interval as the last one, which was how she knew he was not reading. "Because they are not mine," he said. The fire went down and neither of them got up to it. The rain came against the window in a handful and stopped and came again. "Thank you," said Damaris. "For what?" he said, specifically. "You are not going to make me say it." "No," he agreed. "I am not." He turned another page. "In the spring, Tamsin rode. She came down to the yard on a Tuesday in April in her old boots, when nobody had asked her and nobody had mentioned it in 3 years, and stood at the door of the loose box where the smallest of the blacks was kept, because he was too gentle for a team. After a while she went in. Hobie put a saddle on him and said nothing. Damaris held the horse's head and said nothing. Tamsin got up and looked between the ears a moment, as though checking the world was still in the same arrangement, and then went twice round the school at a walk, and once at a trot, and got off, and gave the reins to Hobie, and said, "He is very short in front," and went in to her lessons. Nobody in that yard made a moment of it. Damaris went into the tack room afterward and stood among the hanging leather with her hand over her mouth for about a minute, and then came out and got on with the day. There was a ball at Cadre House again the next December. Damaris went to it in a green dress, in a carriage with a crest on the panel, because the paint had gone back on the door 2 summers before, and she had been the one who told him to do it. The drive had been raked. The frost was down again, and the horses went up it carefully, the way they always had. Halfway through the evening she went out of a side door and down the steps into the yard without a coat, which caused consternation among 2 footmen, and none at all among the coachmen at the brazier. They made room for her at the fire. Somebody put a tin cup in her hand. She stood among them with the music coming over the roof in pieces, losing half of itself on the way, and listened to an argument about a horse at Ripon that had been running by the sound of it since summer. The cold came up through her shoes, and she let it. Then she gave the cup back and thanked them, and went up the steps. He was at the top of them, in the light of the open door, without a coat on either. He had not come to fetch her, and he said nothing about where she had been. He had heard the door, and counted, and found that he could not count her. "You are cold," he said. "That is the cold," said Damaris, and took his arm, and went in.